Welcome to Curator's Chronicles, where history takes flight and stories soar. I'm your host and curator, Christian Gurling. Every episode, we delve into the remarkable stories behind aviators and aviation's most intriguing historical moments, both real and imagined. But today's episode is a bit different from our usual format, and it's all thanks to a chance encounter right here at the Tillamook Air Museum. As I was going about my day, I noticed a visitor wearing a distinctive t-shirt emblazoned with the emblem of the F-117 Nighthawk. Naturally, my curiosity was piqued, and as it turns out, this wasn't just any aviation enthusiast. I had the privilege of meeting Linda Hunt, a woman whose career has been deeply intertwined with the F-117, one of the most secretive and significant projects in aviation history. Linda worked for Lockheed Aircraft in their elite unit known as Skunk Works, a name that resonates with anyone familiar with cutting-edge aerospace innovation. This unit has been the birthplace of legendary aircraft like the SR-71 Blackbird, U-2 Dragon Lady, and of course the F-117. Linda's role at Skunk Works was crucial. She worked on putting together technical publications for the F-117. These documents are far more than just manuals. They're essential for ensuring the airworthiness, safety, and reliability of the aircraft and its systems. They guide operators, maintenance teams, and others in handling some of the most advanced technology ever created, much of which was classified at the highest levels. Imagine working on something so secretive that you couldn't even share it with your family for years. This was Linda's reality. In this special episode, we'll explore Linda's extraordinary career, diving into what it was like to work in an environment where secrecy was paramount and innovation was the order of the day. If you've ever wondered what life is like behind the veil of top secret projects, you're in for a treat. Join me as we take flight into the hidden world of Skunk Works and the incredible minds that make aviation history possible. Well, thank you for joining us, Linda.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
So let's start from the very beginning, Linda. So where did you grow up at?
I grew up in the San Fernando Valley. It's called North Hollywood. It was 20 miles from the city of Los Angeles, and it was a rural area at the time.
Okay, and probably not rural anymore.
No, not anymore.
So at what point did an interest in airplanes take hold with you?
Well, my dad was hired at Lockheed in 1939. The English had ordered Lockheed's Hudson bomber during the war, and so he worked on that. And then when we went into the war, he worked on the other airplanes, and he worked there for 32 years. From 1939 to 1971, he had to retire because he had a heart attack.
Okay. And what were some of the airplanes that he worked on during the war?
I couldn't tell you. I don't remember. I know he worked on the Constitution and the Constellation, and the Electra. He worked on that, and he worked on P2V. If you know what that is, it's a radar. It has radar on top of it, and it looks for submarines.
Okay.
And that's what he did the last few years of his life.
So you certainly came by this honestly.
Yeah. Yes, I always wanted to work at Lockheed, but every time that I applied, it was a recession, and they didn't need anybody.
Okay. So you mentioned Lockheed. So how did you come to work at Lockheed Skunk Works? I would assume one would have had to know somebody back then, even to get an interview. How did this all come about?
Well, I worked for a company across the street called Pacific Air Motors, and we overhauled jet engines. And I was promoted to a salary job that required a secret clearance because we were overhauling the engines for the SR-71.
Okay.
And one of the ladies, when they shut down the company, one of the ladies had gone to Lockheed, and she said they're looking for people with secret clearances. If you can pass the typing test, which I did, they'll hire you.
And what was the typing test like? How many words did you have to type a minute, if you recall?
Well, I think you had to type 55 words a minute, and I typed 65.
Okay. And so you go in for an interview. Do you recall who interviewed you, and what was the interview process like? And were there other additional background checks, I assume, that you would have to go through with Lockheed Skunk Works?
Yes, I was interviewed as a typist. That's what they were going to hire me as. And when you're first hired in, you have your clearance, and it has to be transferred from Pacific Aeromotive to Lockheed. So I was put in the ice box, as they called it, and the ice box was government security. So I worked for them for 6 weeks while I was waiting for my clearance to be turned over to Lockheed.
So, and once the clearances all came through, then did they tell you what project or projects that you would be associated with?
The first project that I was on was not. It was in the planning stages, so everybody was working on it. There was a big room of engineers, and I was the typist and the file, took care of the files, and had to get them whatever they wanted. If they wanted something, I'd have to go to the library and get it for them, since they were engineers.
Okay.
And it didn't last very long. And I was in charge of 26 files that all had locks on them, and all the locks had to be different.
Wow.
Different numbers. So the security person that ran security for the secret part came down, and he said, this project is going to go away. They didn't accept it, but the customers that they had didn't accept it. So he said, do you want to come to work for us? So I said, sure, because I didn't have anywhere to go. So I worked for regular security for about 11 months. And when I was there, they said, we need someone who has a top secret clearance. So we're putting you in for a top secret clearance. And that'll take about 16 months.
Wow.
So while I was working there, what we did is we accepted papers from, secret papers from people to destroy them, or we gave them out to them. And there was a certain requirement of how you did that. So it was very interesting. And so because I lived in the San Fernando Valley, and most of the people that I put down as references, because you have to have people that they kind of research them too, to make sure that they're telling the truth. So I got and the only person that was on my list that they had to talk to far away, because everybody else was in the valley, was my brother in Chicago.
Okay.
So I got my clearance in 11 months.
So they do a very thorough background check on all your references and.
Oh yeah, they talk to them and see what kind of character they are, if they lie or if they've got police things, if they were arrested or whatever.
So this was all pertaining to the F-117. Is that correct?
No, this was all of the projects that they were working on.
Okay.
When I was in, so it was because each project was separate.
Okay.
If you came to work and worked on the 117 or the SR, because those were the only two I could talk about because I didn't know about the others. You had to go through security for everything. I'm trying to think how to word this.
So when did you first learn that you'd be working on the F-117?
My friend that helped me get into Lockheed was a secretary to one of the directors, and she had the director had tech pubs, technical publications under them. So she said, I have a friend that I made that works for us, and she's really nice, let's have lunch. So we had lunch, and during the few days that we had lunch together, this person said, Miss Sigwood said, I wish I could find somebody that knew tech pubs. And I said, well, I do, because when I worked at Pacific Automotive, I helped the librarian, and she taught me how to do technical publications, how to put the new pieces in and take the old pieces out. Mm-hmm. So she said, well, come upstairs with me and do one for me. So I went upstairs with her after lunch, and I did one, and she said, I want to hire you as a salaried personnel. So I said, oh, well, I got to think about this. And she says, well, you can't really talk to your husband about it because it's secret. And so I said, well, okay. So I talked to my father, and he said, take it. So I took it.
Did they tell you anything about the project? Was it called the F-117 at the time, or was there another name given to the project or aircraft?
It was called Senior Trend or the Half Blue Project.
Interesting.
And yeah, so each project was compartmentalized. So I worked on the 117, and somebody else was working on the U2. We didn't see each other. And if we did, we didn't talk about it.
Now, of course, during this time, everything's so secretive, of course, while these projects are going on. Did they have you sign anything like a non-disclosure agreement, or did they just tell you, like, hey, you need to keep your mouth shut? How did the company work to keep what you knew about the airplane a secret? You mentioned everything being compartmentalized. Was obviously that was expected of you guys, but when
you got your clearance, you were interviewed and told that you could not talk about this for 20 years, and they hired people who had clearances or had good backgrounds that were ethical, that didn't blab everything out. Mm-hmm. And so they just told you, if you do let anything out, you'll go to prison.
So a good incentive not to say anything to anybody.
Right. Because you heard about the people that do blab, and you know how it happens to them.
Sure. And
Yeah.
so it's interesting, your husband, your family, they didn't even know what you were working on. Did your husband know you were working on something secret, or did you have a cover story that you were supposed to tell him, and or your family?
Well, my cover story was that I was working on the L-1011
Wow.
at
Okay.
Lockheed.
Uh-huh.
And because of my top secret clearance, my husband knew that it was something that he couldn't ask me about. Well, he asked me about it, and I said, I can't tell you anything because it's secret, and I'm getting a top secret. So you don't, I don't talk to you about it. So, it isn't when you came home and said, how was your day? You didn't talk about it. You just said, oh, it was okay or whatever.
Right. So you had this cover story that you were working on the L-1011, but obviously he must have known you weren't working on the L-1011.
He didn't know what I was working on, but if he was asked, he was told. I told him to tell him I'm working on the L-1011 because that was white world stuff, and I was working black world stuff. So he knew that I couldn't say anything.
Yeah, and he knew better than to press you about it.
But he wasn't going to do anything.
So over the years there were, of course, rumors about this aircraft that were reported in various media, and interestingly, in a notable incident, an F-117 actually crashed in Sequoia National Forest in July of 1986 that killed the pilot. And it's interesting because the military went to great lengths to conceal the airplane, even removing the wreckage of the F-117 and then replacing it with a wrecked F-101 Voodoo. You must have seen these stories and heard others talking about the aircraft. What did you think about all this speculation?
Well, I knew that they had to keep it secret because they didn't want anybody to know about it. So I knew that the Air Force, because that was the Air Force that went in, not us. The Air Force went in and had to take care of everything. So there was no speculation. It was a military operation, and we didn't know any more than anybody else.
Was there talk internally about what had happened with the F-117, about that specific crash?
Not really, because we knew that it crashed, and we knew that the Air Force was taking care of it, so there wasn't much we could talk about.
And so you must have read some of these newspaper articles about what it was, whether it was top secret or not, and kind of chuckled in a way because you knew and everybody else didn't.
Yes, that's true. That's true. We knew that the 117 had gone down, and so the only thing we could sit back and say is the military operation is taking care of it, and we can't talk about it.
Yeah. So this is interesting. You're working in a top secret environment that very few people have been involved with, and information that very few people are privy to. What was the working environment like at Lockheed Skunk Works? Was it extremely stressful? Was it stressful and then laid back at times? What was that all like?
Well, we were in the area with writers and typists, and you had permission to know what was going on. And to me, it wasn't stressful because I talked to the Air Force a lot. The people in the field, they say, well, we need you to send us some more books or whatever. And so I was cleared to go out in the hangar because I had to deliver new information. So I would go out in the hangars, and I got to see them working on airplanes, from the start, and then the next one, then the next one, and the next one. So I got to see a lot of what was going on, and of course, we couldn't talk about it.
Do you have any recollections of specific aircraft? You walking into a hangar, and obviously, the F-117 is a very unusual looking aircraft. And some of these aircraft were as well. It must have struck you, I imagine, as like, wow, this is a very different looking aircraft than conventional airplanes.
Yes. Well, we were told about the airplane and the radar coding on it and everything. And so when I would go out in the hangar, this hangar was just all 117, and all the guys that worked on it had clearances, and they had to, I would take secret or top secret out into the hangar, but it was to the person, because we had to have signatures. You couldn't just hand it to them, because you were responsible for it. So you would go out there and they would sign for it, and then they had to keep it under wraps if it was top secret.
So these were technical documents related to the F-117.
Yes. And so a lot of them, one guy did one part on the airplane, and then it would go on to somebody else. So there wasn't anybody that knew how to put the plane together. They only knew their part.
Okay. So you go into a hangar. How? And you said you go into the hangar and the F-117's there. Was there more than 117 there at any one time, or how far completed were these airplanes when you were in the hangar with them?
Well, you would start out, they were just putting the airplane together. Okay. And then the next station, they were doing something, and the next station they were doing something. So I would say there was it's a huge hangar, so I don't know how many stations there were, but there was a lot of stations. So you could see when you walked in what it looked like to begin with, the bare bones, and then they'd work till the end, and then they would have take it out into Edwards Air Force Base, and they would meet Air Force people, and they would fly the airplane, or see how it worked, and if they were happy with it. So each plane went to Edwards Air Force Base to be delivered to the Air Force, and then the Air Force flew them to wherever they wanted to. Okay. Have them based.
When you were in the hangar, did anybody ever give you a tour, or sit you in an airplane, or how close were you able to get to the airplane, or was this just, hey, this is business, I need to get this technical document to so and so, and I'm going to hand it to him, and then I'm going to leave, and that's it? And
yeah, I'm going to hand it to him, give a signature, and then I have to go back to work.
Okay. So definitely no dilly dallying.
No, it was all business. Okay.
Did you ever meet any of the pilots that flew the airplanes?
Oh yeah.
During this time,
the pilots would come in to technical publications because they wanted to see how Lockheed worked everything. So the pilots would come in and they'd say, we're here for the day, and we want to meet you because you're the one that makes the publications, and then they're sent out. I would send them out. I would look at them, look at what the engineer had written because the typist typed it up, and then I would send it to the print shop, and the print shop was printing publications for each airplane, so I would have to wait to get them, and then I would get them all boxed up take them to the tarmac, and an airplane would fly them to. I had five to eight. Finally, it ended up 8 air bases that I had to send to.
Okay.
And so I would mark on the box who they went to, and then the pilot had to sign for them, and then he would take them to the air bases, and the air bases had to sign for them, so that you have a continuity of who signed for what and where it went. So it was a really efficient way to do things. And then the airplane used to take them there.
Sure.
And then
what was management like there at the time? Were there a lot of taskmasters there, or as long as you were doing your job, everything was pretty. They were pretty hands off. What was the running of? What was the operation like there?
Well, the writer would write it. The typist would type it. I would send it to the print shop. I would get it ready to go to the plane, and as long as I did my job, they left me alone. If I talked to the air bases, because I would say the people who were in charge of getting the technical publications to the guys would call me and say, "Hey, we're going to need some other ones. Can you send them to us?" And I said, as long as I have something in writing. So then they would send me something in writing that they needed another one, and we would make it up for them with all of the changes in it and send it out to them.
That must have been really something, knowing you were involved in in these secret and sometimes top secret projects.
I was very proud, but I couldn't tell anybody about it.
Yeah,
I was very proud that I was helping because of desert sands and how it stopped the first Iranian thing so fast.
Right. Yeah.
Because our plane wouldn't.
Right. So years go by. At what point then could you actually tell your friends and family what you were working on? Do you recall what year that was, or anything about that first time you began to reveal some of the things you were working on at Lockheed Skunk Works?
The president at 1986, I don't know who was president at that time. There were so many. I think it was one of the Bushes. Told about it on the news. And so we had a meeting in our office. Everybody came in, and the president said the plane existed, and that would have been in 1986. And they said you could tell your family what you did. So it was pretty exciting for me to be able to tell them that I worked on this airplane.
And so how many years had gone by at this point how many years had you worked there at that point where you were then given clearance to tell them?
I started work in late night. Well, I worked at Lockheed in 1980, so it would have been 81. So that would have been when I went to Tech Pub. So in 1986, that would have been 5 years.
Okay, wow. And I imagine that your friends and family must have had a ton of questions for you.
The ones that were interested in airplanes did, and the ones that weren't interested didn't say much. They just said, "Oh, that's nice."
Uh-huh.
Which I thought was strange because it's such a strange-looking airplane. And I had pictures because when we were given awards for, completing a task that was important to the Air Force. So Lockheed would give us awards, and we'd have pictures of the airplane. So I was able to show them pictures of the airplane. And most of the family was very impressed. And they said, well, we know you can't talk about it too much, but it's nice to know that somebody worked on it. That we know somebody that worked on it.
Absolutely. So the Air Force would give you these pictures. Was this before you?
The Air Force didn't give us the pictures. It was Lockheed itself.
Oh, okay.
They did it, and the award was Linda Hunt did so and so, and then the picture would be on the other side.
Okay. Now, was this before that you were given clearance to tell the people you knew about the airplane? That they gave you these photos?
Yes, so I had to keep them at work because I couldn't take it home, because if something happened on the way home.
Right.
Here you got a picture of that. So I had to keep them at work until we were able to tell people what we were doing.
Yeah, keep them up on a bulletin board or stowed away in a desk, and that's interesting.
Stowed away in a desk.
Was it, looking back, was it difficult for you to keep the secrets, for so long, because I think the natural tendency for all of us, and, being social creatures, is to want to talk about things and want other people to share in our own excitement.
No, it wasn't hard because you were told that you needed, loose lips sink ships. Mm-hmm. That was a motto during the war. You knew that you couldn't say anything about it because if that person said something, you could be put in jail.
Sure.
And you were ethical in the part that you knew you couldn't say anything, so you just kept your mouth shut.
Mm-hmm. What did you think of the airplane itself and your work on the project? So when the F-117, it first went into combat in 1989 during the invasion of Panama, and then subsequently in the first Gulf War, and then again, of course, in Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan in 2001, and then again in Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2003. What did you see? You had done a significant amount of work on the F-117, and you see it in these conflicts that are keeping freedom alive here in this country.
Yes, and I was very proud that I was part of it, that I helped the plane stay in the air, So we would talk about it within our station, how the planes were doing, and none of the planes were downed. The pilots were all safe, and because if you saw pictures of it, when they first went into Iraq, they were shooting ammunition into the air. You could see it going up into the air because they were trying to shoot it. They couldn't see it, so they didn't know where it was. So they would try to shoot up in the air. So they had a couple of planes that maybe had some dings, but nothing important. And all the pilots were safe. So I was very proud that we accomplished that with no planes or pilots down.
Yeah. So for those of us who aren't as familiar with the F-117 Nighthawk as you are, is there something that you can tell us about the F-117 that perhaps very few people know?
Well, the airplane was designed with real, what am I trying to say? It had different, I'm having a hard time here. it wasn't a smooth airplane. It had all kinds of what's the word I'm looking for? It was not a smooth plane. It had all kinds of curves and sharp edges. So the signature on the radar screen was shown as a very small bird. So with radar bouncing off of all of these edges, it just looked like a small bird. So they couldn't tell whether there was an airplane or not. And that was secret for a very, very long time.
So looking at a radar screen, you would literally think it was a bird. That it was not an airplane; it was an animal. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they think it was a bird.
Interesting. And how many years total did you work at Lockheed?
I worked there for 20 years. Probably 19 on the 117 and 2 years. 18 years on the 117 and 2 years in security because I went back to security for a while because security had no idea of how tech pubs worked. So I went back to work for security for a total of 2 years. My first year before I went into tech pubs, and then a year trying to teach them about tech pubs because they didn't know anything about it.
So you were very much in demand there at Lockheed.
Yeah, at that time I was, yeah.
So what other projects you mentioned? The SR-71 besides the F-117 did you work on?
Well, I worked on the SR-71 when I was at Pacific Air Motive.
Okay.
Because we overhauled the engines.
Okay.
But the first project I was on was a preliminary one that Lockheed said they could build for the Air Force.
Okay.
And so we had the big room with all the engineers, but the Air Force didn't like what they ended up with, so that project went down, and then I went to security and then on to tech pubs.
And the F-117, yeah. So the vast majority of your time at Lockheed was actually working on the F-117. That's amazing.
Yes, it was.
Wow. So tell us about this opportunity you had fairly recently to actually sign an F-117 that's now in a museum. Tell us where this was at and how this all came about.
Okay, when the airplane was to be shut down in 1999. It was 20 years then. So I got an invitation from Lockheed saying, come up to Palmdale. We want you to say goodbye to the airplane. So they had 2 airplanes on the field, and I was retired, but I was let in because of my badge and everything. So we went there, and they said, okay, there's 2 lines. There's one for everybody that worked on the airplane, and there's one for security. So I got in the line for tech tubs, and I signed it, and they said, now there's 2 planes that are going to go. The one with most everybody that worked on the airplane will go to the Smithsonian. The other one will be a float, like they didn't know where it was going to go, and I don't know where it is right now.
Okay.
I'd like to know because what they did is they took down the doors for the wheels, and they put in a whiteboard so everybody could sign it. Just sign your name that you worked on it, and it'll go to the Smithsonian. So I did. So then the people from security came over to me and they said, well, you work for security too. You need to sign this one. so, so I got to sign both of them. And Lockheed said the Air Force is going to come and pick up these. No, not pick them up, fly them out. And the one will be flown to the Smithsonian and they'll be put in there. And then the other one, they said they didn't know where it was going to go. So I don't know what happened to it, but it's around somewhere. And I was very proud of that I would be in the Smithsonian.
Absolutely. Well, your work is incredible, and of course not just you, but the entire team there at Lockheed working on this incredible airplane, this incredible sophisticated airplane.
Yes. So, I was very honored and proud to be part of this great airplane. And the pilots, some of the pilots were there, and they were saying that they were very happy because everything went smoothly on the airplane, and they wanted to say goodbye to that and thank us for working on it.
Wow. And did anybody else in your family follow in your footsteps, so to speak, working in the defense world?
No, nobody else did. My brother, he had moved to Chicago, and he was working for different places back there. He never was interested in airplanes, and I had no children, so and most of my family had moved away. I was the only one left, and my cousins and stuff were scattered all over, so nobody else followed in my footsteps. But it was a very exciting time and very rewarding because you could see what the airplane was doing when they went to war.
Yeah, the fruits of your labor. Yeah. And obviously,
so you were really.
Your father obviously must have been quite proud. Him being a Lockheed man himself.
Well, when I got my first paycheck from Lockheed, my husband said, you work there 2 weeks before you get it. And so he said, don't tell your father where you're working, just that you have another job. So I said, why? And he said, because he's going to be so proud to know that you work at Lockheed. So on my paycheck is a little skunk because I worked for the Skunk Works.
Uh-huh.
And so he knew about everybody who worked at Lockheed. He was in the white world, but everybody at Lockheed knew there was a black world, and it was called the Skunk Works. So when I got my first paycheck, we went to my mom and dad's house, and I said, here's my first paycheck, and I wanted you to see it. So he looked at it, and he just puffed up, and he said, you work for the Skunk Works? And I said, yeah. So, because he had worked so many years in the white world. So he was very, very proud.
And he may have been just a tad bit jealous, maybe.
Yeah.
Did anybody say anything? You go into a bank and you cash this thing or you put it in the bank. Did any of the tellers look at this? And there's this little skunk for Lockheed Skunk Works on the check.
Well, the thing of it was is most of us there was a place called the Lockheed Credit Union.
Oh, okay.
So the Lockheed Credit Union, they had people working there. So if they did look at it and did notice it, they didn't say anything.
Sure.
Yeah,
they were in on it in a way. Huh.
But most people did go there with their checks. If they wanted to bank at someplace else, they would go there, get the cash, and go to their bank.
Interesting.
But I always worked with them because it was just down the street. We could go down the street and cash our checks,
And they probably treated you really well working at Lockheed, yeah. Wonderful. Well, we appreciate your service working there at Lockheed and helping to keep this country safe. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Christian. I appreciate it.